Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett
Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Maxine Clark with me. Maxine, how you doing?
I'm great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
I saw you in a parking lot just a few weeks ago, and I said, hey, do you remember me? You spoke at our summit a few years ago, and gosh, probably now 5 or 6 years ago. And you were kind enough to give of your time, and so now we're in your amazing office here, and we'll talk about that. But if you can, like I do on every podcast, is start with the backstory of what's helped make you the woman that you are today.
Well, I had many great mentors, teachers, neighbors, people that believed in me, never treated me like I was anything, that I was small, but that I was small. My favorite animal is a giraffe. I think of myself as a giraffe. I just always had people that encouraged me, and particularly my teachers. I am a very lucky girl in that respect.
Yeah.
My father got our house when he got the GI Bill after the World War II, and we lived in a good neighborhood and went to good schools and had great teachers, and I went off to college and never looked back.
And was started at Florida and then ended in Georgia, right?
I grew up in Miami, Florida, Coral Gables, Florida. And my high school had more people in it than most school districts in St. Louis.
Wow.
But that's a difference in other states. And I went away to the University of Florida, and then I transferred to the University of Georgia because they wouldn't take women in the business school at Florida in 1967, 68. So I transferred to Georgia and loved it. I was one of just a few women in the business school, but it was great. And I actually found my interest in advertising and marketing, which was part of the journalism school, so I got to do both. And I had a great education there, and in fact, I just returned from a visit there. Wonderful place, obviously. Yes. It's a great state university. Go Bulldogs. Yeah. And I learned to be a Bulldog from the Bulldogs. But was intending to go to law school, and I had to go to work to pay for law school, and I got this great job and I'm on a leave of absence from law school today.
Didn't quite get it done. That's great. You've done just fine. Tell us about this. I was doing my research. I thought it was a really cool story about your mom and what she did during World War II. Mm-hmm.
My mother and father lived in Albany, New York, and that's where the state capital of New York is. And my mother, when she graduated from high school at a very young age, because you could take these tests, the Regents exams, and test out of your grades. So my mother graduated from high school at 14.
Oh, my goodness.
And she was an excellent typist and an excellent shorthand person. She did everything really fast. And she got a job in the typing pool for the governor and the first lady of New York, which was Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. And when Eleanor and Franklin went to D.C. to be the president, first lady, Eleanor asked my mother to go with her to be in her traveling secretary team. And my mother only got paid when she traveled, but fortunately they traveled a lot. And she went with Eleanor all over the country, and they saw things that probably we all wouldn't believe today, but that's the way children with disabilities were treated, or people that were incarcerated, or that might not have changed as much as we would like it to. But certainly children with disabilities and people with mental disabilities were institutionalized, and it wasn't necessarily a place to get them better. It was a place to just keep them down. And when Franklin died, Eleanor gave everyone and her women on her team a small amount of money. It was a lot then to go out back wherever they were going to live. Wow. And change something that they saw on the road when they went to places. Yeah. And my mother had this tremendous feeling for what she called the differently abled, particularly children with mental challenges, learning disabilities, Down syndrome. It wasn't called Down syndrome then. And she and 3 of her friends, got together and pooled their money and started a school in Miami just for that. So
did that make you think bigger and believe bigger? Do you think back in when you were growing up and seeing that? I mean, one, you're at the highest office, right? Your mom's got firsthand of that. And but, I think about your career as you obviously the founder and former CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop. You climbed the ranks at May Company. You're the president of Payless Shoes. I mean, all these things. I didn't know any of that backstory before getting ready for this. And so you got to believe in yourself and believe big, I think. So did that help, obviously, or what was the path that led you?
Everything helps. Yeah. I mean, it's our childhood is so important, and all the things we hear and see that people don't know we're listening to. So your children and other people's children, they listen to us and they hear, and it has a big impact. And I'm really concerned about that, because when I think about all the things that had an impact on me that I wasn't supposed to be listening to, but that built me up, that gave me aspirations. And I don't know that that's what kids are thinking about and hearing about in today's world. But I have been a big thinker. I've never thought about something in the smallest sense. I've always thought about it, how much bigger can it be? I'm a pretty creative person, and sometimes you can take it too far. Like I believe, dream the dream supreme, and then figure out how to do it on a Ford budget, instead of a Bentley budget.
Yeah.
It's possible, but if you never have the dream, you can't make it as good as you think it can be. And I did that for 20 years working for the May Company on their money. I got to have ideas and drive business and drive revenue and be successful at something. I didn't even know that industry existed. I would go shopping with my mom whenever we did look in windows. I didn't know how the merchandise got from one place to another. But once you get in there and you find out, this is cool, I'd like to do that. And you start to learn about the consumer, and you learn. So I was always listening. I was always a nosy, curious person. It's my superpower. And I looked up to adults. I knew someday I was going to be there too, and I wanted to learn from them. And I was always listening in on every conversation. I mean, it was reading. My giraffe I would look up upside down on teachers, desks, and those are things that curiosity. I would never tell a child not to be curious. Right. If there was something I didn't want them to see, I'd put it away. But all those influences, teachers, neighbors. My next door neighbor in Coral Gables, Florida, was the basketball coach at the University of Miami. And he taught us all how to play basketball. He taught me how to be a point guard. And what he did, I didn't know this at first, but he had a basketball court on their garage, top of their garage, and we would all play basketball out there. And one day I got up early and I was listening. I heard something outside, like knocking, like a hammer. And I looked out and he was raising up the net. So he started us at a place where we could achieve, and then he kept moving it up, and he saw me in the window and he goes, "Don't tell." And so I got to see real basketball players, college basketball players, and I love basketball. Even though at the time I was in high school and college, girls didn't play varsity basketball, or there certainly wasn't Title IX to help you go to college on team sports. I don't think I would have made the basketball team. Yeah. But it doesn't stop me from loving basketball and understanding what a point guard does. Point guard's the leader of the team, like the quarterback of the team, and what the relationship between a coach and a player is. And I'm really intrigued by that these days because of the change in college sports.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy, and yet this incredible talent from all over the country are vying for these roles, and they can be in charge of their destiny a little bit, which I do admire, but I think it's kind of sad that they're also going to miss the loyalty of being on a team for 4 years and growing with that team for 4 years. So they'll have some things we won't like. But luckily for me, I got to observe that from afar when basketball players were maybe like 6'2", not 6'8", or 7 feet. And I loved it, and they were a tremendous influence on me. My neighbors, my mother worked, and Doris stayed home, and she would see me when I came home from school. She'd open the door and say, "Okay, put your books down. I'll see you in a little while." You didn't have to worry about that. You just could play in your neighborhood. And those were good influences. And when I talk to people here in St. Louis about their past in this neighborhood, they tell me the same thing. I never locked my door. The neighbors, we would all go out and play. Somebody would call you at 5 o'clock and say, "It's dinner's ready," and you could go over to a friend's house. You could go into your own house. And everybody had the same memories here in St. Louis that I had in Miami, Florida. And the only thing that was different was the weather. Yeah. But the relationships with your neighbors. And that's really what we're trying to build, whether you're building it in a company like Build-A-Bear, building a place where people love to come to work every day, and they share that with their customers, and the business keeps growing. Or here at Del Mar Divine, where we're bringing organizations together that are here to solve problems for our community so that they work together. So 1 + 1 never equals 2 anymore. It better equal at least 100 and maybe 1,000 in order for us to have the impact that we need to have in our community.
Yeah. So talk more about that. We'll dive into that, the Del Mar Divine. And so what is it? Let people know they're listening to this. What is it? How they help? And what impact are you all making?
So the Del Mar Divine is actually a multi-use real estate project.
Which is the building we're in today.
Yes, we're sitting in here in one of our conference rooms. But it was originally St. Luke's Hospital. The first hospital building was built in 1904, and it's still here. Wow. They just built around it like a lot of hospitals. But that original building is still here. And we've made use of the operating rooms, of the classrooms, of the hospital rooms, our apartments, and So we have apartments, we have offices for nonprofits, and we have retail that services the community, meaning we have a restaurant, a bank, a pharmacy, and an urgent care, and a Edward Jones office. That's the kind of retail, service retail that didn't exist in this neighborhood for decades. At one time, this was a very prosperous neighborhood. I don't mean it was necessarily rich, but it was a middle-class, strong middle-class neighborhood with every single church and synagogue represented here. People could walk anywhere they needed to go. They could walk, whether it was to the park, to Forest Park. We're in walking distance of Forest Park. But you can see if you look up on some of the churches, they were once synagogues. God doesn't care. He's glad they're still in use. But there's some that you'll see that are empty, and that makes me sad because those are beautiful, buildings that once meant a lot to a neighborhood or to particular families.
Yeah, the architecture down here is incredible.
Yeah, it is, and this is an incredible neighborhood because we really are on Hollywood and Vine for St. Louis. When that just, in Hollywood, that would be worth zillions of dollars. In St. Louis, where we sit right here in this building, is the center of St. Louis. And we're right between WashU's undergraduate campus and their medical school campus. We have students that live in our apartments, grad students that work here in the building, WashU grads and SLU grads that work here. We're really in a perfect place to be able to do the kind of work that's needed to keep a community growing and prospering, especially the underserved people. But that's not all we work here with immigrants. Some of the immigrants that have come to St. Louis in the last year from various countries come to classes here on Tuesdays and Thursdays to learn English.
Oh, wow.
And it's just amazing to see how much they learn English now. From the first time they walked in to now, it's such a total difference. So we're really happy about that. We have all of our tenants use the spaces that we have here, the public spaces, for conferences. And last week we had the Health Action Network National Conference here. Health organizations from all over the country came here to St. Louis to see what's going on in St. Louis and to learn from us. It was a really wonderful, not just Del Mar Divine, from all the other health things that are going on in the community, but they came here. We've had the President's Council on Infant and Maternal Health because St. Louis needs some work in that area. They came here. They've only had that meeting 2 times outside of Washington, D.C. Wow. And so we were really honored to have them pick us to come. We had Barack Obama's program for young men here. Their national organizations came here this summer and had a 3-day meeting here. It was inspiring to be able to just walk in and know what they were talking about, what they're working on, and that organizations in St. Louis are seen as the cream of the crop in that work. Yeah. So we're glad to be able to do that, and we're really working hard alongside the mayor and Neil Richardson and the St. Louis Development Corporation to inspire others to do this kind of work. Every project doesn't have to be this big. This is 500,000 square feet of an old hospital that was empty. This was empty for quite a long time, so it was pretty sad inside. But with the right talent, and I don't know how to do that. I had to find a partner to do it.
Build the team.
You build a team, just like you do in anything that you want to be better than when you found it. And we were able to do that. And it's my business sense, but it's also my sense of the consumer. Because before I could do that, I had to know what they wanted. I had to know what the people in this neighborhood were looking for. And they had to learn to trust me because they knew me because they knew Build-A-Bear.
Right.
But they didn't know me. And so I wanted them to know me, that I was here for the good of this, that my office was going to be here too, that I was going to work here every single day. And that it was important for me to make a difference in St. Louis and for them. And I love history, and St. Louis is just filled with incredible history, some of it good and some of it not so good, but overall it is our history, and we need to own it and build on it for the future and for our children.
Well, thank God we got people like you doing that work. That's amazing. I want to talk about the shopping trip with the 10-year-old girl that started the thinking behind it. But really what I want to talk about first is where I'm curious is I would assume being president of Payless, successful company, doing well, probably financially, I would assume. And, people sometimes, I think, stay in their comfort zones and don't walk away from something because they are comfortable, even though they have a passion for something else. What was it about you that made you step away from being a president of a big company, start something that we had no idea if it was going to be successful or not? What was that?
Well, I worked for the May Company for over 20 years. It was a wonderful career. I learned so much. I had the best job in the world, and each of them was a higher level job, working with customers and working with young people, training them to take on from you. But one of the things in 1996, when I made the decision to leave the May Company, Payless was being spun off as a public company, and it was an opportunity for me to take my money and run, so to speak. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that technology was very, very big. and it was going to change the world. Make Company was very conservative, and we were only allowed to like do email inside the company. Like it was, there were so many things that technology, I could already see it happening, and yet it wasn't there yet. I didn't invent it, but I knew, boy, if we can do Excel spreadsheets and not do ledger pads, just imagine how much time we can save in our thinking. And they weren't so high on all that stuff. They weren't really thinking about that technology. And so I decided that was an opportunity for me to go and do something else. I didn't know what it was going to be. I just knew I was going to do something different, and probably for children. Because for me, shopping was when I was a little girl, my parents couldn't afford much, but when we went to look in the windows, you could sort of dream about what you would want. And my sister and I were both really small, so my mother made all of our clothes. Otherwise, we would look like, things would be too big or way too young for us. So I knew the value of that. I knew what it meant to have something that was new, and people would compliment you on it. So being in the retail business was fun. But I knew that I was thinking about something different. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew if I just relaxed, it would come to me. And when I came home to St. Louis from Topeka, Kansas, my next-door neighbors' kids lived next door to me, and I said to their parents, I'll pick them up from school. Don't worry about it. You're go to work. So I picked up Katie and Jack at their school, and it was the time of Beanie Babies, 1996. And they were really popular, and Katie had a particular one she was looking for. And the sign on the toy store said, "We have Beanie Babies," but they didn't. And when we walked in, and she could see they were sold out, and she was really upset about it. And she wasn't normally a kid that got very upset about it, things like that. But she said, "Well, that's not right. They said they had them." And she said, "These are so easy. We could make these." And she sort of looked at the one they had sitting around, and I knew that we could, because I had this light bulb moment. But the kids went downstairs to my craft room, which they got out all the stuff to kind of design the animal they were going to make, and they were going to cut out the material and sew it by hand. And I was upstairs on my computer netscaping, because that's what we could use then.
Yeah.
And Katie came up and she said, "What are you doing?" And I told her, she said, "Well, I didn't mean that." I said, "I know you didn't, but I think it's a worthy idea. I'm looking to see if I can find any factories in this country that make stuffed animals that I could buy and reverse engineer to be a retail store where you could make your own stuffed animals." She says, "Oh, cool." And she goes back downstairs, and they work on it. And a couple of weeks later, I told her that I had talked to companies and nobody wanted to sell it. They thought that I was crazy. And she said, "Well, why don't we do it?" And I don't know if she hadn't said that, what that would be, because, she was engaged in the idea already. And every child I asked said, "Oh, that would be so cool. Can we make this? Can we make that?" Every parent said, "Why would anybody want to make their own stuffed animal? They could buy it at Target or Walmart."
Well,
yeah, why not?
We know the end result.
Yeah, we know
now.
that. And we know parents have as much fun, thank goodness, as kids. I wasn't for sure about that, other than my own experience with my own teddy bear, who was cleverly named Teddy.
Yeah.
When I was 10 years old, my father decided that he was going to take it away from me because I was sucking my thumb, and I would go to bed at night, and I'd read, and he thought that braces were in order for me, so he just decided to take the teddy bear. I knew he had it, but I didn't know. I didn't really want to know.
Yeah,
I knew
right.
and I didn't want to know, but I got the meaning. And whenever I saw a child with a teddy bear, I'd say, "Don't lose that teddy bear." And Katie had her bear, George, who was given to her by a man named George, and so she called him George. And Jack had his bear named Teddy, and they always, whenever they came over my house, those bears were with them.
Yeah.
And I know what a teddy bear means to a child, and it was just really a perfect moment, because we were getting into this hard screens that we're going to be dealing with, computers.
Mm-hmm.
We needed to still have something soft, and the teddy bear is the quintessential soft thing to have. And
Absolutely.
It starts when you're a baby, and it goes through your whole life.
And 9 months later, the company was...
9 months later, we opened our first store at the St. Louis Galleria.
Yeah.
And that was pretty quick, but because I knew the mall owner, I knew how to do all this. I had all my contacts at Make Company that were all willing to help. I think they thought I was a little bit kooky, but I had some
Like, yeah, here you go,
kooky
here you go,
ideas
right.
before, but they were on their nickel, and now these were on mine. So they said, "Why not? Let's help her." And the first day, we had people waiting outside to get in, because customers got it. They got the idea. They were hungry for something to do locally in any city that we opened, where they could put their hands on it and touch it and feel it, and not just be buying it off a shelf. And so it was an ultimate personalization experience. We'd also come out of the Cabbage Patch craze, where people were rushing around in stores to find one in a box that had a name close to their child's name, if you remember anything about that. So there's been things in the industry that I was part of that I learned from as well. And I said, how do you put 1 + 1 together to come out with 100?
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you say 1 + 1 is 100, right? Because that's what we talked about earlier, is thinking big. And I tell my kids that before they go to bed every night. Think big and believe big. And so why is it 100?
Because 10 just isn't enough, or 2 is certainly not enough. That in today's world, in order to be successful, you have to really break through. And so something that's just average doesn't break through to people. It doesn't mean, look, I didn't invent teddy bears. Ray Kroc didn't invent hamburgers. Howard Schultz didn't invent coffee. We just all did a special twist to it that made it successful. And when you see all of these enterprises that are growing and changing as we live and speak, like I'm a basketball nut. I'm crazy about the WNBA. And I am watching all those games, and we couldn't watch them before. They weren't available to us to watch. Or if they were in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. So it's changing. The world is, and it's open for tremendous ideas and opportunities that also present itself for St. Louis. I have a perfect site for a WNBA arena and team right here in St. Louis.
I love that.
So if children, when they watch TV, or they're watching, or they're reading, or they're going to the movies, whatever they're doing, are they thinking about that? How do we encourage them? What do you think? Could we do that in St. Louis? Even if we couldn't, just to ask them, could we?
Why not?
And when you say thinking big, I mean, we're going to have this incredible Wild Care Park in St. Louis that's part of the St. Louis Zoo.
Yeah.
It is. I've been out there. It is unbelievable. It's a gigantic place. It was the Pipe Fitters Union's country club. Who even knew they had one?
Right.
But it looks so Disney-esque. It's so amazing. It's not even built up yet, but the idea of the way they have it laid out, the pictures that they have. I mean, families are going to stay there for the weekend and go on a safari in St. Louis. They're going to come from all over the country to come to this place. And I think that is so amazing. I'm dying to. And they have a few animals out there, and I'm looking up about the animals. I'm studying them. I'm really interested in all those things. And I think that's me as an older person. Just think about kids and how much imagination is going to be fueled by being at a place like that. Not necessarily to be a zoologist, but to be kind to animals, to take care of the earth, to be, care about sustainability. That's all out there. That's
all
the
experience, right? You just want to create experiences with your families and be able to glamp when you're out there. And
you don't have to go all the way to Africa to have a safari.
I'm on the board for the St. Louis Zoo, so it's amazing seeing all the stuff that's happening there. We're so blessed to have them.
I think they need to be telling more people about it now, starting now. And I also told them that I think that it's a great opportunity to engage children in philanthropy. Let kids come up with their own ideas to raise money for Wild Care Park and see their name on a plaque at Wild Care Park. Neat. Thinking about the next generation of philanthropists in St. Louis, but give them something that they can relate to right now.
Yeah.
And as they grow up, they'll think of hospitals and churches and all other things that they can give to. But that Wild Care Park can change the way people think about St. Louis as a destination. We already are a place that people come to for sports and the Arch and the zoo, but now it'll be even better. It's an amazing opportunity for St. Louis.
I think the number, I caught it at our board meeting last week, that it's going to be potentially the highest attendance of the zoo ever this year.
Oh, wonderful.
Which that's a big deal.
It's a fantastic place.
So you mentioned earlier, and I wrote this quote down, but ideas that have been invented can be reinvented. And so what was that process like for you? Because obviously there was good times and we see your success now, but what was the moment, like maybe one of the toughest moments you can share about Build-A-Bear that kind of knocks you to your knees, but it's like, I'm going to get back up and keep fighting. Can you share some of those, and how did you get out of that moment?
Yeah. When you do business with children, you always have to be a little bit more upbeat than you would be with cranky adults. But the recession in 2007 and 8 was really tough. I mean, we were just growing like gangbusters. In 2006, we bought a company in the UK. We were expanding internationally. And all of a sudden, we hit this, moment in time that even teddy bears were expensive for a family, or people just worried they weren't going to the mall as much as they would have gone before. And in January of 2008, I had to make some decisions. I thought, we're going to have a great Christmas. We don't have to worry about it. We're just going to. And I had to make some cuts in our personnel. And those are people that have been with us since the beginning. And it was so hard to do. And if I had, one thing I wish I knew that the tough times were coming, but I thought we would, Christmas we would do better. Yeah. And if I'd made the decision sooner, I might have been able to get the jobs for the people faster. I mean, everybody did get placed and got better jobs and good jobs and all that. And it was once a bear, always a bear. So the people are still in my life. But it was really hard, and I never wanted to do that again. I wanted to be able to anticipate. Well, you can get too conservative also. You can go the other direction where you're not realizing that there's an opportunity in front of you, and you can't make money unless you invest money. So those are things that, it was a really learning. It was the hardest thing, and it was the best thing. And it took us a few years to come through it. I mean, it was really, but all that time, we were also, a team of us were thinking about the future, the store of the future. What was the next Build-A-Bear going to look like? And in 2012, we brought out the next Build-A-Bear store, which was, we built it over in West County. We made it into a beautiful new store with some new attributes, and the customer loved it. So it was it's expensive to do that first store,
Sure.
but then as you roll them out, they get to be more affordable. And since then, the team has done even more work. They've found smaller ways to put a Build-A-Bear in a mall that might not have been worthy of having a full-blown Build-A-Bear store, places to be more portable. So when one of our stores is being redone, we can put a portable store out in the mall. They are an amazing team of people. And the fact is that Build-A-Bear, from what we built from 1997 to 2000 and what year did I retire? 2013. And to see this incredible team that Sharon's put together, the best thing that any founder can do, besides the idea that you come up with, is the next person that's going to succeed you. And I am the luckiest duck in the world to have Sharon Price John running that company. We are great friends, and we don't agree on everything, but it's go for it. That's always the way I've been too. And we have a lot in common, and we care about people similarly. And the business has been very, very successful. And she's brought new people in, and still there's a lot of older people that, not old, but people that came to us right out of college and still work there. That are still there today. Store managers that have been with us since their store opened. That is, that every day I just thank my lucky stars for creating a company that people, we created it so that people would want to work there. But not any different than anything I would have wanted to work. I was treated as an employee of the May department stores as if I was the only employee. I had a great experience there. And I had a bad experience in Kansas when my house burned down. And they just called and said, don't worry about it. We have a rented house for you. We're taking care of everything. Don't worry about it. Like, how many people have that, that experience? Amazing. You don't want to have that negative experience, but they were always there. And that's just the do unto others as you would have others do unto you is just the way you should run a company also. And that's how we ran Build-A-Bear. So that's why we have so many incredible employees. One of our longtime employees recently had a death in her family, and we were all at the funeral home. And, just to see each other, some of us hadn't seen each other in a while, but just to know that we were all still there for each other was really the kind of company that I walked out of there crying. It was a sad experience, but mostly for the joy that we all can get from each other.
That's great. And how many stores are they
About
at?
500 now.
Yeah, so 500. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
I mean, do you ever step back and think, holy smokes, what did we just do and what have we built?
I do. I pitch myself a lot, but I also know that there's thousands and thousands of malls. We never intended to be in every mall, and we wanted to always be a special experience, and we are that still today. I don't go anywhere. I can be on an airplane where I don't think I know one person, and somebody will come up to me and say, "Are you Maxine Clark? I just want to tell you my build, but I know you hear these all the time." I said, "I never tire of it.
I want to hear them all.
Go tell me." And that really makes, number one, that they recognize me. Number two, that they care enough to tell me that story, and they're just amazing stories, and they're always warm your heart stories. They're always on the good side. So sometimes when I can open a letter, or sometimes I'll get a letter from someone. We had a young intern here, and she wrote me a letter that I opened up this morning, and she attached pictures of herself when she was a little girl with her teddy bears and her story. And I just thought, I'll never throw this letter away.
No.
This is like the perfect thing. But all of us, just about any founder in any company, no matter what your business is, it doesn't have to be teddy bears to feel that way, feels that way about their company. And I want them all to realize that they can create something great. They just can't do it by themselves.
That's right.
It takes a village to raise a bear.
Yeah. Well, I think that I'm a founder of a company as well, and I think about the 64 people that work in our firm, but then it's their spouses and then their kid. Now there's hundreds of people that you're responsible for, right? And you think about their Christmas and their Thanksgiving table, and that's the stuff that I take to heart, is like making sure we have a culture to where we can provide, right? Mm-hmm. And they can put the presents under the tree and all that stuff.
I work with a lot of college students and entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and I'm always amazed that they haven't thought that through. I always say, well, what kind of, I say, what culture are you creating in your company? I said, what do you mean culture? And I said, well, when people come to work here, what are they coming for? What kind of benefits are you going to offer? A job? I said, no, that's not enough. And honestly, a lot of them have never worked anywhere where they worked in a culture that was positive, or if they worked, they didn't realize it was around them. That's what provided this living for them. And in St. Louis, we have a lot of family businesses that actually do have fantastic culture. And you wonder, and I think about this too, not necessarily, I know Build-A-Bear's in great hands now, but what's the next generation that runs
Sure.
it going to be doing with it? And family businesses that pass it on, because sometimes the children don't want to do that. How do you then find that somebody else's child that might want to do that and really will give it the joy and love that you gave to it? But there's no guarantees that because you create a business, your children are going to want to do that. But you hope they will, and you hope that they'll at least have respect for the culture that you've created, the value that you've created for other people, and they may go off and do their own version of that somewhere else. But it is a big responsibility, but it also is something incredibly creative. And I'm not an artist, but to be able to put together a company that offers people the chance to be successful financially and professionally and personally, because they make new friends, and of course with COVID some of that was disrupted. But that is probably the biggest negative that COVID did to us. It separated people. And in companies with a high culture that came to work every day and had parties and cheered on the customer, and when you hit milestones you were jumping up and down for joy, to not have that, and for new kids not to coming into the business not to see that, we have to even work harder at it, because it's such an important part of our success. And it is of any company that I've ever read a book about that was successful, from General Motors to Starbucks. It doesn't matter. They've had their own culture, and that people came to work for that. And that it may not be the culture I would want to work for, but for them it was good. And I've learned from that too. You learn what to do and what not to do from people that have been successful.
Yeah, I had Howard Behar, who was I don't know if you know Howard or not, but he was on here and he said, "We're in the people business, not in the coffee business," right? Talking about Starbucks, and it's like for you, right? We're in the oh yeah. So he's a great guy. When you were opening the first one, did you even have in your mind that you were going to have 50 or 100 or 500 stores?
I should have brought it in to show you, but I have I did a 10-year business plan. Nobody writes that now.
Before you even opened?
Oh, yeah. Because I had to convince myself that I was walking away from a 7-figure job to go do this, that I was going to do this. Yeah. And it wasn't the money. It was really that I had a lot of job offers. Yep. And I wanted to make sure this is what I was going to do. And how was I going to convince anybody else, whether it was a banker, a real estate agent, if I wasn't excited about the idea? And so I wrote the business plan. It's pretty detailed. And I gave Sharon a copy of it when she came.
That's great.
And she recently had it, a couple of years ago, she had it bound into a book for me. So I usually take it with me, but I could show it to you afterwards.
Yes.
It is.
Love to see it.
And I had it to the 100 store, way out there. And we made all those numbers. We exceeded them, actually. But having that footprint, that plan, is really important.
Yes.
And, first it is, I tell all young people, if you're not in this, you're never going to convince an investor to do this with you. And my investor story is really a good one. Of course, I had my own wherewithal to invest in the first store, but the St. Louis Business Journal wrote a story on us. The woman reporter was going by our store in the Galleria when it was just a sign on the front that said "Building the Build-A-Bear Workshop," and it had a number, but that was for people that wanted to work there to call us. So she called me and she said, "What is this?" And I told her, "Can I do a story on it?" I said, "Sure." It came out on Friday, and I got a call about 11 o'clock from Barney Ebsworth, who owned Intrav, which was a privately owned company here in St. Louis, that he wanted to meet me and he wanted to understand a little bit more about the business. So I went over to his office on Monday, and he had never been to the Galleria. He wasn't a shopper. I had my bag of animals, and he loved them. What he and I had in common is we both loved animals, and we were both entrepreneurial. And he said to me, how much money do you need? And I said, in the next few years, $4 or $5 million. And he said, "Is next Thursday soon enough?" Oh. And then he said, "How much do you think I should have for my $4.5 million? I learned my lesson on that one. To go for the higher." He said, I said, "I don't know. What do you?" I was smart enough not to tell him.
Don't tell him a number.
And he gave me his number, which was very, very reasonable. And I said, "Okay, we're partners." And it wasn't next Thursday, but pretty soon. Sure. I didn't need it. It didn't need it yet. And when the Galleria opened, Barney was like a kid in a candy store. He was so excited to see what I had created. The other is he owned a Intrav, which was a cruise ship, a travel company. So they were high on customer service and experience. And he wanted to make sure that nothing got in the way of me giving the customer experience the way I wanted it. So he would fight for that at any board meeting if we were ever talking about cutting expenses or anything like that. He was not about cutting anything for the customer. And I really appreciated that. And he was a Renaissance man. He was an artist. He was everything that you could possibly imagine. He was an art collector. He was a philanthropist. He was a designer. Wow. He was a entrepreneur. And I didn't even know him, but he knew people that I knew, and he had done his homework on me. And I think everybody said, if you get behind her, you don't have to worry about it. She's going to work her butt off for you.
How cool is that?
And he was my first investor. And during the IPO, when we were going through the IPO, we all agreed to a certain pro rata share that we were going to put into the IPO. And he called me. We were in Minneapolis on our way home to St. Louis. We met with the last investors, and he said, I'm not selling. I don't want to sell my shares. And I said, Barney, we already sold them. We're actually oversold. He said, I don't want to sell. I want to be associated with this company. I don't want to leave. And I said, you'll always be associated with a company. You still have stock. We just have been through this for a whole week. We had to walk him off the cliff. And he came around. But that was also something incredible to me. He could sense that these are choices that you make. And this was all my investors were going to get their money back, many, many times over. But it was also money that we could invest in the company, in the business. And we still had, control of our business. And so I'll always be indebted to him. He passed away a few years ago, but I'll always be indebted to him for calling me on the phone that day from an article in the Business Journal. Yeah. And I tell that story all the time because a lot of
think of what has to happen. That person had to see the phone number, take action, make the call.
Right. And she wrote a really good story. She came over to the office sitting next to some stuffed animals, and she wanted to know the story. She was really more interested in why did I leave the May Company? Why would I leave a big job like that to go do this? And I got her really into the story. When she wrote the story, she wrote this incredible story that he responded to. And I'm forever telling her name is Linda Postel. I always am thanking her. She doesn't work there anymore. But she got it because she had 3 daughters, and she was really into what we were doing, and she wrote a great story. And the rest is history. Yes,
that's great. What a story. What were some of your external motivators along your career? Because obviously you don't just wake up and every day is a great day. Hopefully a lot more better days than worse.
Well, the May Department Stores was a great company to work for. I don't know how I knew to work there or not. But I had my college professor worked in retail. He was a consultant to retail, and he said, you'd be great in retail. And I was going to law school, so I had to go to work to pay for law school. And I went to Washington, D.C. To go to school, and there were 3 department store chains: Heck Company, Woodward and Lothrop, and Garfinkel's. Woodward and Lothrop and Garfinkel's were both kind of very fancy. And I went to the Heck Company for an interview, and the woman interviewed me, and she said, you're overqualified, we don't need any more people in our training program. And I went down to Woodward and Lothrop, and while I was the next day I was in the interview, and they said, somebody knocked on the door and said, guess what? Dale Blackwell was fired, and they walked her out the door. Well, she was the woman that told me I was overqualified. So after this interview, I just wanted to work at the Heck Company. I don't know why. Yeah. I walked down there and I said I was there for my interview, which I had already had. And they said, well, she doesn't work here anymore. And I said, well, is there anybody else that can talk to me? And they said, yes, let me find, and Stanley Mont was his name, and he came and he said, well, let's go get a cup of coffee. He was just trying to pass time. And while we were having coffee, the president of that store, Alan Bluestein, came in and sat down at our table and asked me a lot of questions, and he said, hire her. They weren't going to hire me. And I was just the luck of the... So it's having the guts to kind of step out. It was a little white lie. Yeah. I actually did have an interview with her, but it had passed. And they met me, and I will be forever, for that opportunity. But then my boss got sick, and I had to take over from him, and I didn't know anything, and all of the vendors helped. But I was a young woman just when women were coming to work, and the clothes that there were for us to buy were terrible. Mm-hmm. So because most things were made in America, I got to kind of rethink it and show what I wanted. And we had a great business. When Harry came back, he got a really big bonus, and he shared it with me, which I wasn't bonus eligible. Wow. So that was a really other kindness, really rewarding people who help you be successful. But also, I was a very curious person, and I worked on a project where I wanted to know. I would watch the people in the store. What were they buying when they bought the dress that was in my department? What shoes were they going to buy? What cosmetics were they going to buy? And I asked my boss. I said, "Can I go down and Silver Spring and look at our charge cards?" Because those days you only had your own company charge card. And he said, "Absolutely." So I got out my green spreadsheet, and I started looking at all the charge cards, and not the names of the people, but what were they buying and what was common. And I found all these common denominators, and I went back to the office and I said, we could put together a catalog, and we could get the vendors that are all, I can prove to them that this would be worthwhile. And those are the days when you called up on a 1-800 number and ordered. We put together a catalog. I came in on Monday morning and went to the call center, and they said, "You're in trouble." I said, "What do you mean I'm in trouble?" And they said, "You sold out. You had to sell out of everything. The phone hasn't stopped ringing." And that was the beginning of us understanding customer relationship management. because we could look at our own data files, which we really weren't using. And I got to be an example. That's how I got to St. Louis, because David Farrell was the CEO of the main company at that time, and he had met me in Washington, D.C., but when he heard about this, he said, we got to do this everywhere. Yeah. And he brought me to St. Louis, and I got to sit on board meetings and travel all over the country on looking at acquisitions. And I was at the table. I had a seat at the table, even though it wasn't like a voting seat at the table. Even if I was sitting a little bit back.
Learning.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it was like I was a sponge, and this was the perfect job for somebody with my level of curiosity. And I would go back and think about how much bigger could we do this? How many more could we have sold? So I've always been thinking about, millions, not thousands.
Yeah.
And that was, it must have always been in me. Somehow I learned about this from watching TV or reading in books, but my curiosity has yet to still be totally fulfilled. Yeah. These maps that you see around here are of the city of St. Louis, and as I'm thinking about my part in its renaissance, how do I know it better? How do I get to know it better? Because I live here, but I haven't been a part of everything in St. Louis,
Sure.
and I'm not from here. And it's been really enlightening. There's so much opportunity, and I'm on Team St. Louis.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. What advice would you give yourself now, looking back on your career, talk to that 40 or 45-year-old person, man or woman, that's may listen to this and they're in this part in their career and they need some advice from somebody that's done it at the highest level possible. What advice would you give not only yourself but that man or woman?
Well, I would give the advice that I got from, I think it was right before I left Payless, from Yogi Berra, who said, if you see a fork in the road, take it. It's never going to be the perfect time. It's never going to have enough money. Yeah. It's never going to be. But if you have an idea and something that you want to do differently than what you're doing, write yourself a business plan, because that's the most important person. It doesn't have to be a fancy business plan. It could be entries in a journal. But tell yourself what it is you want to do, as if you're talking to an investor or talking to a banker or to a landlord in a space. And it comes together pretty well. And while now so many business plans that I read from young people in college are like PowerPoint presentations, I still ask all those questions, but tell yourself the company, that if you're not satisfied with what you're doing, what is it that you would change and what would you put into your company? And sometimes people can't get very far with that because they don't really know what they want to do, that they want to make coffee or but if they have a hobby or a passion or an interest, they can do that. Sometimes it's a nonprofit opportunity. Most often it's a for-profit opportunity.
Love it. Yeah. Where do our listeners get involved in any of the causes that you have, and how can we help St. Louis and you and your family foundation and all those things? Well,
St. Louis is an exciting city to be in part of right now. There's a lot of really good things going on. I would say our website is delmardevine.com, and there are all of our agencies are there, and they all do different things. A third of them are in education, a third are in healthcare, and a third are in community development. But the Clark Fox Family Foundation also has, there's a place called Mapping, and what we did is we looked at some of the ecosystems of the social systems in St. Louis, like homelessness and criminal justice reform and immigration services and early childhood needs. And we have 26,000 nonprofits in St. Louis. It's way too many. Maybe because there's so many, people don't know that they really exist. They're so micro organizations. But check those out and see if there's something that you want to get involved in, because they're there. You can click on them and it'll get bigger and tell you a little bit more about them. But we also do blueprint4.com, which is an opportunity that we created right after Ferguson for young people all over St. Louis, parents all over St. Louis, to access the summer camp programs for their children and after-school programs. So blueprint4.com this summer had almost 10,000 summer camps listed for families. It's free to use it. It's free to list. We also provide scholarships for children to go to summer camp, because it's about the average summer day camp is $250 a week. If you're even a middle-class family and you have a few kids, that's an expensive proposition for a whole summer. So we try to get kids exposed to things that they might not ever know. Where my friends, where I live, always knew what camps to go to, but in North County and North City, they didn't know all these things. Might have even existed a few miles away from their house. So we put those tools. We made the tool available and easy to use and access, and it's the same platform that we started with in 2015, and it is we've adapted it I want to put in a plug for them too, because it's they did a great job for us, and they helped us, and they adapted it to us, and we couldn't have done it without them. So that investment that seemed like a lot in 2015 for a platform to create a summer camp platform for families has been monetized not because we make any money, but because we've used it for 10 years, and it's been useful to families. So the Technology Partners they were a great partner to us, and we still partner with them today. So there are places in your local community that if you just ask, somebody will refer you, and they are so glad to work on something that's good for the community. Yeah, they get paid for it, but they're still really glad. They don't do it at the same profit margin they would do it otherwise. They really want to help you help others. Technology Partners definitely wants to help others.
They're great people.
They're great people, and so we're lucky, and that's what loyalty is another thing that I think is really important, is when you find a good vendor that you want to do business with, always make sure that you're they're making the profit that they need to make as well, so that you can all survive together and grow together. And we have so many of those that we still do business with today, that I did business with at Build-A-Bear and for different services, but they adapted, and it was the same vendor that made shoes for Payless that made shoes for bears. So
awesome?
you just ask, and they'll say,
Right.
well, yeah, I think we could do that. And everybody had fun with it, and people
That'll be part of something.
Yeah, and for Del Mar Divine, a lot of my friends thought I was crazy. Why are you doing this? And they'll ask me all kinds of questions. But when they come here, they said, "This is fantastic. How can I help?" That was what I wanted to do. Is really to realize that we can all play a part in the betterment of St. Louis. We have so many assets here. We are just a few blocks from the park, from Forest Park. We're right between WashU's undergrad and medical school campus. We're right near the Loop and the Central West End. You don't have to go very far to access everything in St. Louis from this location. And
great parking.
Safe, great parking. And we're doing so many things with the neighborhood. The neighborhood uses our facilities. The community organizations, they use our facilities. And you sit back in the background, you can hear and learn from every single person who's here trying to make this better. And we worked together to create Delish on Del Mar, which happened October 18th, a food festival on Del Mar between Union and Kings Highway for all the new restaurants that never existed before. And thousands of people came out to try the food and see what they thought was missing in St. Louis, but it isn't. It's been here for a while. We just are trying to make it better every single day. I
love it.
Truly divine.
I love it. Love what you were doing for the city of St. Louis, and thank you again for your time and being on the Circuit of Success podcast. It's been great being with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.